What if I said to you that there is absolutely nothing wrong with you for feeling the way you feel or for showing up the way you show up in your life? And what if everything that you have been through is actually shaping you?
Hey, and welcome to Masks Off Inner Freedom for People Pleasers and Perfectionists. This is a podcast for those who are tired of holding it all together. I'm Kim Gross, your host, and if you've ever felt like you're doing all the right things, but still feel anxious, disconnected, or quietly burned out, you're in the right place. Here we talk about the patterns you don't even realize you're living inside of: self abandonment, over functioning, chasing approval, and mistaking productivity for your worth, and more. This isn't about fixing yourself, it's about remembering who you were before you learned to perform, perfect, and please to belong. Each week, we'll slow things down. We'll unpack the nervous system, the inner critic, and the subtle ways that you learned to disconnect from your true self so you can stop living from pressure and start living from presence. This is your space to take the masks off. So let's begin.
Let me just take a moment and explain further what I just referred to in those two questions. What I want to talk about is ownership and taking responsibility. Now, often when people hear those words, they tend to get defensive. They freak out. They're like, what do you mean I have to take responsibility? It's so much easier to go to a place of blaming others in our lives or situations for how we show up or why we feel the way we feel, why the circumstances of our lives are the way they are. It is so much easier just to say that it's because of this or because of that, or he did this, she said that. But here's the thing: when I talk about ownership and I talk about taking responsibility, I'm not talking about you taking a whip and cracking the whip on yourself. I'm not asking you to attack yourself or to blame yourself. It's not about swinging the pendulum from blaming and attacking others to blaming and attacking yourself. It's not your fault. But what if I were to say that taking ownership and taking responsibility for the way that you show up in your life and for your part in a relationship, when you can take responsibility and you can own, what if I were to say that that is your superpower? That's a powerful, powerful place to be. And so that is the lens that I want to take today in this episode. And what I also want to point out is the difference between victimhood and ownership. Because let's face it, when we are in this place of blaming other people or blaming circumstances, it puts us in a place of victimhood. We feel like a victim. We feel like we have been victimized. And it might sound like, oh my God, why is this happening to me? Or, oh my goodness, I hate my life. I hate my life. Why is this always happening? Why is he being this way? Instead of saying something like, how do I want to show up differently? How do I want to respond? How can I take responsibility for my part? in the situation? Where did I miss the mark? That is taking ownership. And that's the difference between being in victimhood and freedom. So I want to share with you, as many of you know, if you've been here for a while, and if you have, thank you so much for following my podcast and following me. It's actually going to be 6 years next month since I first started doing Masks Off. I cannot believe I have been doing this for 6 years. That's how much I enjoy doing it because the time has just really flown by. So, anyway, if you have been here for a while, thank you so much. I'm so grateful that you continue to show up and listen to my podcast. And if you're new, welcome. And also thank you for stopping by and listening. If you are new, then I will say that I released a book a year and a half ago. And the book is called Free to Be, A Pathway to Inner Liberation. In this book, I have a whole chapter on ownership, and I write about the difference between victimhood and ownership or taking responsibility. So I'm going to share a little excerpt and then explain in more detail. So I say releasing blame. The years when I was dependent on my husband to fill my needs created many issues in our relationship. My sense of self had become incredibly weak, and I blamed my husband for how miserable I felt. Whenever there is a victim, there is a villain, and I made my husband that villain. Blaming was the only way I knew how to fix the situation. Remember, one of the masks I wore was that of the fixer. I believed that if he would only listen to me and do things the way I thought they should be done, everything would be fine. I wouldn't have to look in the mirror and change my patterns. If he would simply change his, the reality is that we can't change other people. So I felt powerless.
Before we keep going, I want to take a moment to share something really close to my heart. If you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking, wow, this feels familiar, the people pleasing, the perfectionism, the constant self pressure, I wrote a book just for you. It's called Free to Be, A Pathway to Inner Liberation, and it's part memoir, part healing guide. I share my own journey of learning how to stop living in victimhood, take off the masks, and come home to myself, but not by fixing myself, by understanding my patterns with compassion. This isn't a book full of fluff or quick fixes. It's honest, it's grounding, and it's for anyone who's ready to live with more peace and freedom. You can find Free to Be on Amazon. And if the book resonates with you, I would be so grateful if you would take a moment to leave a review. Even a few words can really help others to find it.
That right there is so important because we cannot change people, places, and things. And when we try to change or we try to fix and we fail, which inevitably we will, when we fail at being able to control other people, places, or things, we can feel powerless. And that's how I felt for a majority of my life. That's how I felt in my childhood when I couldn't fix things. I couldn't get an outcome that I wanted. I couldn't change the way that the people in my life were showing up, the way they were acting. And so I felt powerless. And then I just continued to carry that torch and blamed my husband for the way that I felt. Now, that does not mean that people don't do awful things to us or that people aren't mean, that people aren't abusive. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that we give other people the green light to treat us poorly. That is not what I'm saying here. Because when I was a child, my mom and dad missed the mark a lot. And my needs were not met in the way that I needed them to be met. And I was not loved in the way that I needed to be loved. Now, it was not their fault. They didn't know what they didn't know, nor did I have the wisdom, the knowledge, the skills when I had my own two kids. I was not equipped to love and nurture them in the way that they needed. I was still had this wounded little girl driving the bus and being the one in charge when I got pregnant, had kids, and was a mom. So I'm not saying that is even a reason to give me a green light or going back to my mom and dad to say that it was okay, because at the end of the day, it had a huge, huge impact on me. And I created so many patterns in order to try and control. My inner controller was born and became very alive when I was a young girl, in the sense that my inner controller was trying to keep me safe. And I'm not saying that the things that my husband said or did were okay. So that's not the point. And I want to really make that clear and highlight that, underscore it, shout it out loud. I'm not saying in any stretch of the imagination that we should allow others to treat us poorly, unfairly, abusively, and so on. But what I am saying is it is up to us to take responsibility for how we show up, what our part in the situation is. So let me give you another example. For the last couple of days, have been feeling irritable. I've been feeling off emotionally, mentally, and physically. I'm depleted, exhausted, and I continue to push through. I kept pushing through and really ignoring my needs, ignoring my needs, and ignoring what is really going on under the surface until today, which is appropriate that all of this was coming to the surface in light of recording this podcast episode. So I noticed during these last few days of feeling exhausted, depleted, irritable, feeling like my life was somewhat unmanageable, I found myself feeling more irritable and critical and judgmental of my husband and wanting to blame him for everything, where I'm in attack mode. And when I'm in attack mode, I don't fight because I'm not the one who fights. I'm the one who will be more passive aggressive. And so even that, me saying that right there, is me calling myself out and taking responsibility. I'm not calling myself out to beat myself up. that's not the point either, right? So there's two very important points. One is not to allow other people to treat us poorly or unfairly, but the other is not to go and then be that way with ourselves. The point and the reason for being self aware and calling myself out is so that I can take responsibility and do something to show up differently than the way that I did. Okay, so how can I do this differently? This is taking ownership. Well, first of all, just taking a pause is so important. Once I have had the awareness that I was triggered or that I was off, that I was feeling depleted. That's the first thing. Have the self awareness to see that I am not myself. I'm not operating on all four cylinders. Then take a breath, pause, and then ask myself, what is mine? What's my part? What's my co creation in all that's going on? Like I said, one is I have just been exhausted. Maybe that's not entirely mine. It could just be that allergies or something is kicking up. But the part where I keep pushing myself and not taking time out to rest, that is mine to own. Taking the breaks, giving myself the permission to rest. And that is so incredibly hard for us to do as recovering perfectionists because we're so caught up in the doing and our productivity, we think, equals our worth. So I've done many episodes on that. If you're interested in understanding or hearing more about that, by all means, go check out some previous episodes on productivity and perfectionism and doing versus being and giving yourself permission to rest. So I got caught up in my pattern of doing, and I did not allow myself the opportunity to just rest and to take a break or to slow down until today. It took me 3 days. So that's the first thing, to notice, give myself permission, and ask what is mine. And then choose to show up differently, which is why today I was like, okay, I really tapped in to my body and my energy and how I was feeling and noticing how incredibly exhausted I feel. And so I just allowed myself this morning to not go to the gym, to spend some time outside in nature, journaling, resting, doing all the things that I know that will help me to feel more grounded and feel more balanced. Now, do I feel 100% better? I do not feel 100% yet, but I am starting to feel better than I did when I woke up this morning or even the way that I felt yesterday. So, the other thing is to recognize that because I have been feeling more irritable and depleted, that my bandwidth, my ability to be patient and to allow and accept others, my husband in particular, to be who they are and to be the way they are, has been minimized. So when I'm a little bit more reactive or just showing up being more irritable and kind of nasty, if I'm being honest, just being nasty, that when my go to is to want to say it's all him, 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 if I just take a pause on that and I take a breath, what's mine? Well, mine is my bandwidth is limited right now because I am depleted mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. And so rather than continuing to overreact or respond or make any kind of big decisions around our relationship, I can just take a breath and just realize I'm not in the best space right now. I'm not in the best space. And maybe it's wise for me to just have more time to myself and to just kind of keep some distance and have some separation for an hour or two or whatever it is that I need. So, the most important thing that I want to share is that when we take ownership and when we take responsibility, it is so key to do so without shaming, because ownership without self compassion is just attacking oneself. It's just putting yourself down and berating yourself. So, this is where the practice of maybe putting my hand on my heart and just really reassuring myself, giving some compassion, some gentleness that it's okay. I'm having a tough time. I'm having a rough couple of days, 2 or 3 days, and to remind myself it's all right. Not every day is perfect. Not every day are we going to be climbing up the mountain. Sometimes on the climb, we have to stop. We have to take a pause, set up camp, build a fire, and just sit and rest, maybe toast some marshmallows, and just get our bearings, recharge, regroup before we can start climbing again. And so it's super important to have that compassion for yourself when you're taking ownership. It's not about blaming. So you can take responsibility for your actions, for your part, without ripping yourself a new one, if you know what I mean. And what I also want to point out is that there's nothing wrong with you for having days like this, maybe even weeks. Maybe you're in this state most of the time and you're thinking to yourself, what is wrong with me? Why am I freaking like this all the time? And what I want to reassure you is this, that you are not broken. There is nothing wrong with you. You are having emotions, you're having feelings that most likely just need to be tended to. And you could be in a place where you're depleted mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally, and your cup might be running empty or almost empty all the time or most of the time. And so, therefore, as a result, you're showing up in a way with other people or even situations where you may overreact and you don't handle it the way you want to because you're running on fumes. And that's not your fault. That's not being broken or that there is something wrong with you. It just means that it's a pattern that's playing out and you need to have a new way of showing up. And if you're thinking to yourself, how do I stop being a victim to my circumstances or to the people in my life? How do I begin to even recognize when I'm wearing the mask or when I'm stuck in these patterns? What do I do? First of all, I would recommend that you get a copy of my book, Free to Be: A Pathway to Inner Liberation, because that's what it's about: how to be free, how to find that path of inner liberation, a path that I walked, that I know very, very well. And I share. I share my personal journey, my personal experiences of how I went from being that victim to having freedom. to no longer feeling like a victim, unhooking from the patterns that kept me so stuck in old ways. So I would say begin there. Start with picking up a copy of my book. It's available on Amazon. And then if you're thinking you want to go a little bit deeper, I have a digital course based off of the book as well. So I decided to make it more detailed, more in depth, but it's something that you can take at your own pace. It's self-guided and it breaks it. I use my 5-step power pathway as the framework for both my book, but also the digital course as well. And so this is my 5-step power pathway is a repeatable process that you can use every day. I still use it all the time. Whenever I feel triggered and I get caught in a pattern, boom, I go in my 5-step power pathway. And what I have talked about today in this episode is the second step of the 5-step power pathway. POWER, power, and O is for ownership. So that's what we talked about here today is taking ownership. And if there's anything that you take away from this episode, I hope that it is you will remember to be so gentle with yourself and so compassionate. And if you're starting to see your patterns and you're seeing how you show up as a victim, just remember that it's not your fault and there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You are in the process of becoming your true self.
As we wrap up today's episode, I just want to say thank you for being here and for taking this time for yourself. If this episode resonated with you, I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe to the podcast or leave a review. Even a quick star rating helps more people find this space and reminds the algorithms that these conversations matter. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have a question, a takeaway, or something that came up while you were listening, leave a comment or send it in. Let's keep the conversation going. This podcast isn't meant to be a one-way street. It's meant to feel like a community. If you want to learn more about me, my work, or the ways we can go deeper together, you can visit my website. All the details are there. Until next time, take a breath, take the mask off, and be gentle with yourself. I'll see you soon.